pendulum ride malfunction almost kills 5 people. North Carolina State Fair Vortex incident. On October 4th, 2013, 5 people, all between the ages of 14 and 39 years old, got on Vortex, a pendulum ride available at North Carolina State Fair that year. It had been an exciting day so far. North Carolina native bands the Ultimate Michael Jackson Tribute Band and Who's Bad had performed earlier, and the fair wasn't going to close until 11 p.m., so there was still enough time for fun. That night, 13-year-old Max Byrn got on Vortex along with the other passengers in line. After operating in Europe for 15 years since 1997, the ride had just recently made its way to the U.S., and it was so far a huge success. The fair was well into its 7th day, and Vortex was at full capacity and operating normally. The thought that the day would end in tragedy never crossed anyone's mind. Max, like all the others, got on the ride expecting to enjoy the thrill of being swung around in the air. The young man had no idea that he would soon witness a horrific accident, the likes of which left the victims scarred and devastated the state of North Carolina. So, what exactly happened on that fateful Thursday night? What horrors did the victims face before they were finally taken to the hospital? What caused the accident? And what do we know about the one man responsible for this near-fatal occurrence? It was a warm night in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the North Carolina State Fair was full of the hustle and bustle of family, friends, and lovers looking to have a good time. Since 1853, the fair had taken place annually and has put a smile on millions of faces throughout the year, featuring carnival rides, live music, monster truck demolition derby, and of course, all the food and drink one could hope for. The fair is well deserving of the millions of patrons that come through its gates. 2013 meant the North Carolina State Fair was on its 144th run, and it looked like it was going to be another successful year. However, on that very evening in 2013, what was once synonymous with laughter and fun would be stained with blood and tears. 29-year-old Anthony Gorham, his 39-year-old wife Keisha Gorham, and her 14-year-old son Justin Hunter were at the fair that night. They'd spent the past few hours enjoying the rest of the fair and were in no real hurry to leave just yet. It was the perfect opportunity for them to bond as a family, and they were going to use the time to the fullest. At around 8:30 p.m., they decided to get on the Vortex. Vortex was a pendulum ride that had only debuted in the U.S. on March 14th of that same year at the Miami-Dade Youth Fair. So far, it had been having a successful run in its new home and was a hit at the North Carolina State Fair. The ride featured 2 passenger-carrying gondolas, each at the end of a mechanical arm that was attached to the axle. While the Gorham family waited in line, something strange happened. The lights on and around the ride suddenly stopped. It didn't last for so long, and attendants came around, made some repairs, and the ride carried on. The passengers didn't think much of it. After all, it was just light issues. Things like that weren't deserving of panic. Besides, the ride attendants didn't say anything was wrong with the machine, and they would if it was bad, right? While the passengers were getting off and the Gorhams were about to take their turn, another weird thing happened. Bashir Jabbour, a passenger on the ride, was getting off when his safety harness violently swung up and hit a ride attendant. The attendant stumbled backward, dazed. Jabbour moved to help him, but the attendant claimed he was fine even though he was still clutching his head as he loaded up the next set of passengers. It was about 9:25 p.m. now, and the Gorhams, their son, 13-year-old Max Byrn, and other passengers were loaded onto Vortex. Issues with the light and someone being smacked in the head aside, no one thought anything would go amiss. Of course, the average passenger didn't know the history of Vortex, but the ride had been operating without fail or incident for over a decade, and it had been running just fine at the fair so far. What could go wrong? The duration of the ride itself went without hassle. Everyone on the ride had a good time, and, by the time it ended, some were even considering having another go. However, this would never come to be, as, just as the passengers were unloading from the dormant ride, it suddenly started operating again. At this point, The passengers were already out of their restraints, and Vortex was not supposed to be moving. Being out of their restraints, the passengers still on board the ride were subject to it going upside down and swinging with them still on board. At that point, Max had just gotten off the ride, and he turned around to see what the commotion was about. What he could see was the most horrible sight his young eyes could ever witness. People fell like raindrops from the ride onto the grated metal platform. One person fell and landed head first on the platform. Max was standing barely 8 feet away from the swinging ride, and one girl fell right in front of him. Some passengers managed to hang onto their seats, but many of them were already merely centimeters away from stepping out of the gondola, and none of them were expecting that the ride would suddenly start again. Anthony and Keisha Gorham, along with her son Justin Hunter and 2 others, were the 5 people that were physically scarred by this tragic accident. One second, they were getting off a fun amusement ride. The next, they were flung to the cold, hard ground by the same machine that had only just made them laugh. If at this point you're wondering, why didn't anybody stop the ride? Well, once the ride started up again, the platform operator signaled to the ride control booth operator, who was also the foreman, to use the emergency stop button. However, he panicked and was unable to push the button before anyone got hurt. In the moments that ensued, absolute chaos followed. The ride attendant fell to his knees and began to weep. Multiple 911 calls were made, with each individual just as distraught as the last. All the calls were more or less the same, with terrified individuals saying, "People were hurt badly. They fell 15 to 20 to 30 feet. The ride turned upside down and dumped everybody out. People are bleeding badly. They are not moving at all." By the time the victims were rushed to the hospital, Anthony, his wife, and her son were already in critical condition. The remaining 2 victims were released from the hospital the following day, but those 3 individuals had received the brunt of the incident, and the road to recovery was long and hard in front of them. So the question remains, why did this happen, and what did the actions of one man have to do with any of this? All the years Vortex had operated in Europe and nothing bad had come of it, so what happened now that it was in the US? Well, the reason Vortex malfunctioned was all because of the actions of one man, its new American owner, Joshua Macaroni. The ride's manufacturer had designed Vortex with a system that prevented it from starting once the passenger restraints were off. However, this system had clearly failed, so what happened? Investigations into this began almost immediately. When the Vortex first debuted in America, the only noticeable difference was the backdrop. In Europe, it featured near-naked women, but it had been censored to feature them wearing swimsuits. No one knew that Macaroni had had more than a paint job done on the ride. Vortex had featured at various state fairs, including Alabama, Tennessee, and Ohio, and it had been inspected by state inspectors in all cases. However, when it first reached North Carolina, it was visually looked at by 2 elevator and amusement device inspectors. When a full inspection was conducted the next day, the inspectors found a crack in one of the footwells of the passenger gondolas. They made sure Joshua and his foreman fixed it, and he carried out other physical and electrical tests as per the manufacturer's instructions in their presence. Throughout the inspections and subsequent repairs, Joshua was cocky, short-fused, and reluctantly cooperative. He lacked the proper tools for some repairs and had to be instructed to go get them. The repairs carried out by Joshua and his foreman took 2 days, after which the inspectors cleared the ride for operation. Unfortunately, they didn't know that Joshua had tampered with the ride during the inspection and would do so again afterward. This might seem like a lengthy explanation of the inspection process, but it's important for the next part. You see, Vortex's electrical system featured a light on the control panel known as the safety light. The safety light only came on when all restraints were locked in place. If this light was not illuminated, then the ride would not move. However, during the inspection, a relay was loose in the ride's electrical cabinet. This came as no surprise, as it was a common occurrence among traveling rides. It was a quick fix, and the inspectors left Joshua and his foreman to it. However, When Joshua fixed the relay, one of the gondolas stopped spinning. Joshua remarked that it was working until they made him fix the relay. During the few minutes when the inspectors went into the control booth, Joshua had his foreman block their view and fixed the problem with a jumper wire. The gondola started spinning again, and the inspectors cleared the ride after a test run. He informed his staff about what he had done, but this illegal modification overrode the safety sensor for that side of the ride. The gondola would not give the proper signals to the safety light, and the restraints on it would always read as locked. 3 days before the tragic incident, the ride malfunctioned when a restraining bar got stuck, and only a day before, the ride suddenly started moving again while passengers were offloading. Multiple other incidents involving the restraint bars were reported, but the problem lay with Joshua Macaroni's tampering. In February 2016, Superior Court Judge Graham Shirley sentenced Joshua Macaroni to 5 to 15 months in prison. However, he suspended his sentence to a month in jail and ordered Macaroni to pay a $22,500 fine, the amount he would have made off the ride during the fair. Foreman and Joshua's accomplice, Timothy Tutterow, was sentenced to 18 months unsupervised probation and an 18 to 34-month suspended sentence. He also received credit for 22 days served in jail for his cooperation in the case. At that time, Joshua Macaroni was still new to the traveling rides business, so to speed up what he saw as his inevitable success, he greedily put the lives of innocent people in danger to cash in on an unsafe ride. If he had decided to fix the ride with the proper materials or shut it down until he was able to get it to professionals, the incident would never have occurred. But his lust for money led him to tamper with the ride, costing innocent individuals their livelihoods. As for the victims, although they left with their lives, they were also left with physical and emotional scars from the incident. Keisha Gorham now suffers from PTSD, and her husband, who suffered brain, skull, neck, and spinal cord injuries, is now blind in one eye and develops seizures that prevent him from working.